complexity of carbohydrates, which are sugars, sometimes called saccharides. Saccharides, carbohydrates, sugars, it's all the same word. It's all the same material. This is so much more complex than what we're led to believe and to think that we understand this. So as I started looking into it, I started trying to track back evolution to the beginning. And that brought me into the area of origin of life. How did this whole thing start? I didn't even really know what the claims on the table were. And so I asked colleagues, and they gave me some references, and I started to read about this, and I said, this can't work. This just doesn't work. This chemistry that's being proposed, the chemistry itself screams out that life could not have started this way. Generally, everybody who would like to dismiss me, their H index is much, much lower than mine. So it's hard for them to dismiss me. We've published a lot of papers. I've published a lot of papers in my career, 2, 3, 4 times more papers than anybody who would like to dismiss me. So it's hard for them to dismiss me, which makes it a much harder thing for them to ignore me when I'm saying, hey guys, I don't understand this. How about explaining this to me? Let's take it one step at a time. How would you do this? So going from a single cell organism to a human being, that is the two ends of evolution in a sense. But more fundamentally then is before evolution can even start, you have to have that first cell. Nobody has ever made a cell in the laboratory. Nobody has even taken all the components of a cell. So if you just take a living cell, you deconstruct it into its fundamental pieces and try to put that thing back together again. Nobody's ever done that. Nobody's ever even come close, and nobody even has an idea on how to do it. It's rough. The chemistry is very, very hard. And then once they get these basic raw building blocks of say, a sugar, an amino acid, and a nucleotide, now you've got to hook those things together. You have to make strings of them. Nobody knows how to do that. That's in fact the basis behind my challenge. Nobody knows how to make those strings. And because you have to make those to get your basic building blocks of a cell. Nobody can even make those yet. And then there's a much bigger inherent problem, which is you need the informational code. It's like if you had a computer, but you had no software. Where is the software that's going to run these things? Nobody understands where the code is that encodes this thing. And I'm just here pointing out the obvious. Truly, I'm pointing out the obvious. It's not like, wow, Jim Tour sees something that nobody else sees. No, I see what everybody else sees. Every other synthetic chemist, every other organic chemist sees every problem that I see. It's just that before I started studying in this area, I took it for granted what these guys said. You know, they would say all sorts of things, and you take things for granted because you think they understand. But then when you look in it, you see that this is a house of cards. And when I point it out, even my colleagues who are not in this area, they'll see what I have to say. They go, yeah, are you the only one saying this? Are you the only one speaking up? And you say, well, why don't bunches of people speak up with me? Because they don't want to happen to them what's happened to me. Because you undergo a lot of attack as a result of this. But as I've said before, I've already thrown my hat into this ring, and I can't back out now. I never mentioned God in any of my conversations on Origin of Life, ever. I never mentioned God. They always mention God. Where did God come from? I've been discussing science. Why did you pull out this God card? I didn't touch God. We don't need God to explain this. The science itself screams out, this could not have happened that way. How about we leave God out of the argument? All right, let's leave God out of the argument. I won't mention God. You don't mention God. We will just talk about the science. Would you like to go toe to toe? And we'll just do that. We'll just do that. Put this word creationist aside, and let's see what you can do. Let's see the damage you can do to this creationist when we're talking pure science. You want to go toe to toe and speak to this creationist? No, they don't want to do that. They just want to label as a creationist and run away. So there's 4 classes of compounds. There's the amino acids, which are the building blocks of your polypeptides or proteins or enzymes, all the same thing. It's hooking amino acids together. Then the next major class is you have the nucleic acids. Those are the constituents of DNA and RNA. So you have to polymerize, you have to hook those together to make DNA or RNA. And then you have the sugars, saccharides or carbohydrates, all the same thing. And then you have to hook those together. Those are actually the most complex of all of the three that I've mentioned. Then the fourth class are the lipids. The lipids are what are called sometimes fatty acids. I'll give you the lipids, and I'll give you all the basic building blocks. I'll give you all the amino acids, I'll give you all the sugars, and I'll give you the nucleic acids, which is huge, huge. To give them that is an enormous concession that people have spent 50 years trying to make these things, and they only can make them very poorly, never as clean as you're going to need for life. But I'll give you those. Just hook these together. Now, I've asked 5 questions. Those are not the 5 questions. Those are 5 of 5,000 that I could have asked. And they're not the hardest questions. They're some of the most basic. They're not the hardest. I have a whole list of other harder questions. If you had nucleic acids, which I'll give to you, how do you make that into RNA? Because there's a whole hypothesis that's been around since the 1960s called the RNA world hypothesis. And they have all of these scenarios that RNA formed first. And what I show on this video is if you happened to somehow get a string of nucleic acids hooked together, which I'm going to ask you to say, can you hook these together in the form that is needed to act as RNA? And the answer is no, they can't. But even if you had that, you only have about 4 hours to deal with it. So in other words, to hook it all together, it had to be totally pure. You couldn't have any other amino acids around. You couldn't have any other of these compounds around. Then it had to polymerize. You only have about 4 hours. So this idea that well, you had billions of years, that's billions of years of trouble. Because if something happened to form the right way, you've only got 4 hours. If you had a protein that happened to form, you only have about 13 days and the thing is gone. So that's the problem. Time does not help you. It hurts you. Because the times that you have for the use of these molecules is very, very short. In the case of RNA, which is the primary hypothesis on how life might have started, you have no time. You have no time. You only have hours in order to use this. Hours. That's a big, big problem. You have to have chemistry that's faster than the degradative chemistry. You have on the order of hours. If you make a compound, if I make a compound in my laboratory and I have only a few hours to get it on to the next step, I am working very, very hard to try to cool that down, to try to stabilize it, to try to get it on in the next step. Hours is a very short amount of time. Show me the prebiotic chemistry that would do this coupling. Be my guest.